Hi everyone, this is John here from Night of Ones. I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to the next episode of Worth a Read. In this episode, I'm going to take you through some highlights of my library which go into paranormal phenomenon, mysteries of the unexplained, the sort of stories that we all hear these days on the internet. I'm sure many of you are interested in, and even some of you have probably experienced things like this yourself at one point or another. Each of these books is encyclopedic in nature, so they're great books to have and just open up at any page, and you have something there that you can just digest and get into right away. They always lead to very strange musings, interesting investigations, you name it. It's all inspiring to read these things, and it mystifies the world. That can stimulate your imagination, thinking about what's truly possible. Obviously, not everything in these books is valid. They don't claim to be. Most of them are investigative, collecting articles, sources, all that sort of thing, and compiling it together into a concise, readable version. None of these books go too much in depth into their subjects, but they're great books. They're great books to have to get a glimpse and find out more. I compare these books sometimes to having the internet in a book. Sometimes it's all compiled there together and it's all relevant. So with that out of the way, the first book I have here is the Encyclopedia of the Unexplained, and this is put together by Jenny Randels and Peter Hough, who are a English duo. Crop circles, ball lightning, alien abductions, UFOs, time slips, spontaneous human combustion. This is a great book to have if you're interested in paranormal mysteries, the unexplained, anything to do with that. I just opened it up at a random page here, and we have a lovely illustration, and then a series of articles investigating fairies. And these books aren't afraid to go into some strange territory, but they basically go through all the times that it's been reported, all the cases that they know about. They don't put their own spin or bias on things, but report it how it was, and they've done a very good job indeed. There's standing stones, there's pictures of crop circles in here. You can see on the back that you can see someone's legs who suffered spontaneous human combustion. And this book will tell you a very large portion of what we know about these things in passing. As I said, will not go into a great amount of depth or detail, but it will refer you so that it's very easy for you to look more of this stuff up in detail. It cost me only about £5, and I got it on Amazon. It's a very nice hardback, and highly recommend it, guys. Just to give you more of a quick glimpse. You got color in there as well. Photos, loads of articles. It goes into all sorts of different topics. The next two books that I have are much the same in nature, and they're both written by the renowned science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. So we have World of Strange Powers and Chronicles of the Strange and Mysterious. They're both a decent size, great hardbacks again. I got these for £2 each, guys, from charity shops. If you're ever looking for more random books of your own, I cannot recommend highly enough that you go to your local charity shops. I'm not sure what they're called in America, maybe Goodwill stores, where people leave donations and the money goes to charity. You can find amazing books in there for extremely cheap. But yeah, the first book, the black one here, primarily deals with people having powers, as you would imagine. This would cover things like telekinesis, horse whispering, psychic detectives, people who solved murders or clues with dreams and symbols and stuff like that. Ghosts, like talking to the dead, mediumship, that sort of thing. It has stuff about stigmata in the book, with a great record, great coloured pictures of it all. And Arthur C. Clarke is, he's a great writer. The way he's compiled all this together is really admirable. You could pick this book up, start a random chapter, you know, you finish it in about 20 minutes, but at the end of it you think, wow, that's pretty crazy. This one isn't as sporadic in its nature as the last book, in the way it's structured. It has more precise chapters that you can take as you will. And the other book is more about, say, things like the Mary Celeste or strange events that happen to people, stories from mythology, cryptozoology, all of that sort of thing. Whilst the previous book was a lot more specific to persons. So while Strange Powers, it will mention specific people more, their stories, and linking phenomena together that way. This one is more cultural phenomenons and stuff a bit less personal, or that didn't seem as controlled. And once again, there's a classic spontaneous combustion picture right there. Great pictures, great text, an extremely well put together book that I highly recommend. This next book is very dear to me. I took this book out of my mother's library, who's unfortunately passed now. But having this is a great reminder, and I miss her greatly because she was a big influence in my life, and getting into a lot of these things. She loved all that as well. And this has got to be the best UFO book that I own, or that I know of. It's written by David Richie, who I really grew to respect growing up in my teenage years and reading more and more into it. And I thought that he introduced a lot of new insights or different ways of assimilating and looking at all these different types of phenomena collectively and try to put them into one thing. I'd say this actually, in the long run, really got me starting to think about anthropology as something serious that I wanted to study. But this book, it deals specifically all with UFOs. It says on the back, "Do you know how today's UFO experts explain stories of alien abduction? Who created the phrase close encounters of the first kind? Where the first little green men appeared? What connects the Old Testament prophet Ezekiel to the extraterrestrial spaceships? When George Adamski first met the folks from Venus, and Truman Beltram began his friendship with the beautiful Captain Aura Raines from the planet Clarion? Why the US government feared flying saucers throughout the 1950s. And it's an encyclopedia again. So in this book, David Richie he kind of does two things. He collects all the sources of information, and they're layered out alphabetically so that you can go through like from A to Z and just look up like keywords that we'd have to do with aliens and UFOs, or you can alternatively look up in the index and just see what words are in the book. And this goes into not just UFOs, but also stories of sleep paralysis, demonic possession, encounters with other beings, and he'll go through how there's lots of similarities in these experiences which might link them to being one thing. And that was very insightful to read. This might be a hard book for you guys to find these days. I'm not sure if it's still in print, but it really is a great book, especially once again to open up at a random page. There'll be something there that's very interesting indeed. The book taught me a lot about UFOs, aliens, all that sort of thing. But then it goes into, like here we have Carl Gustav Jung. It goes into some things that seem really unrelated. And it ended up linking me to so many other people's works in this sort of bread trail, going back and forth of information. So even though the topic of the book is UFOs, if you take it seriously and you investigate further what it has in it, then you can learn a lot. It should come as no surprise that I'm a huge fan of the X-Files, and this book is all about the real stories behind the episodes of the X-Files. So this is where Chris Carter got all his inspiration from, writing the show, writing the episode, when he was looking up real stories of how this stuff happened. And it's a really great book. If you know anyone who is like a fan of the X-Files, it's probably going to be like a brilliant present, because it's they went to a lot of effort to just make it this very nice book. So you have like different colored pages, you have lots of full colored pictures, the text is quite big and spread out, so to be like fairly concise, but it doesn't hamper down on the mystery at all. And of course it also talks in depth about the episodes of the X-Files as well, and has quotes of it, and has the pictures of the episodes from the series and all of that good stuff. So it just keeps bouncing off each other, and then you kind of get this idea at points at the end of it that the X-Files is like a lot more. There's like a lot more to it than you see at first glance, because that show can get pretty fucking ridiculous sometimes. But this book shows you that so can real life. This next book is actually a collection of 5 books by a man named Charles Fort. I have not read all of these, but I have read one. I've read the Book of the Damned in full, and I've read pieces of the other ones. And this book is different from the rest that I've got here, even though it's very much the same. This was published, I believe, around the very early 20th century. I think the first book was published in 1919. And Charles Fort is a very strange character, and a character is the best way to describe him. He has a very eccentric personality, and almost an eccentric way of writing, I find, though. Obviously, the further you go back in time, that sort of stuff is easier to see. He spent the vast majority of his life in the New York Public Library, crucially investigating. I mean, very on it, like reading journals every day, reading books every day, on the constant hunt for things that couldn't be explained by the normal means of science. And he developed his own metaphysics of the world. I got recommended this book from George Maxwell, who said that he used to read it all the time as he was growing up. And I have to say, this book is so underrated. The weird ass shit in this book really boggles your mind. I mean, it really, you don't know what to say about it. You don't know how to explain some of these things except with very otherworldly theories that go well beyond their normal lines of conceived existence. He was such an insane observer. The things that he managed to record and keep track of, which would otherwise be just obscured throughout history. He's the kind of guy that didn't have the internet. He was born very far back, so if you were into things like that and really wanted to investigate, it was a completely different method and way you sorted it out. And in that regard, it's very interesting as well to see someone else from a different time of the past trying to piece these mysteries of the unexplained together, because there really isn't much like that until Charles Fort. And he, although his name is obscured nowadays and not a lot of people know about him, he inspired a great amount of science fiction writers and a whole plethora of philosophical ideas about what the nature of reality really is. So it goes a lot deeper than these other books. And it's not encyclopedia, but you can find out all those snippets as well. It's just written more linearly, and that can be a problem with it, because it can be like quite a hard book to read, and Charles Fort tries to explain a lot of his philosophy before he just starts telling you these strange things he's found. But you find out about like fish falling from the sky or raining blood all over the world. You find out about like strange substances found from meteorites, or that nobody can explain their origin, and you have accounts of like people experimenting with it, trying to discover what it is, and it's very strange, a lot of these stories. And as you can see, you have a big fat amount of them. This isn't just a little thing here and there. Charles Fort truly investigated his ass off to find as much as he could, and he done a damn good job. So I highly recommend this as well, though I would give a warning if you don't read a lot, because I read a lot of books, and sometimes I can find this one quite hard to get through, but some books are like a relationship. The more you put into them, the more they start giving back. This one is one of them. You can't just pick it up at a random page and read it like the other ones, but I recommend, and there's a lot of knowledge in there for anyone who's seeking it. This book here is called The Supernatural by D.J. Enright. Full title, The Oxford Book of the Supernatural. And this is a good book that it's more of a scholar's edition to this sort of thing, where someone from Oxford has gone through all of the accounts of, say, ghosts and miracles and supernatural happenings throughout a historical landscape. So whilst we looked at Arthur C. Clarke and the book by Jenny Randels and Peter Hough, a lot of those take, more modern phenomena like UFOs and telepathy and these sorts of things. This book is a lot more historical and is more keen to reference writers like Charles Dickens, or to quote works like Faust. It's more inclined to see things from the perspective of artistic pieces that have been done throughout history, or certain superstitions and cultural analogies and those sorts of things. It's not so much interested, I suppose, in the paranormal. So that would be things that are, such as crop circles, or that's manifested in the real world, but rather things that are seen to be of another world or of a higher nature. It's a really good source book, and the way this one is structured is, you have, let's show the contents here. We have assorted apparitions, loving revenants, magic and magicians, possession and exorcism, spells, witchcraft, devils, angels, hells and heavens, vampires, werewolves, zombies and other monsters, so you have things like this as well, fairies and little folk, miracles and prognostications, art and intellect, dreams, coincidences, sex and the supernatural, near-death experiences. You have spontaneous combustion in here too, immortality, spiritualism. So you got a great book here. It doesn't have many pictures in it. I don't believe it has any actually, which is a bit of a shame. But the great thing about this book is that you, like, for instance, if I open a random page here, I have a poem from John Keats, and then on the next page there's one from Joseph Addison. So you get a lot of insights into previous writers and minds and thinkers that were engaged in this sort of thought and wrote stories about it, and where it all sort of comes from, I suppose. Because the further we go back in time about a paranormal or supernatural event, the more it becomes enshrouded in a mythos through time. I mean, you give it centuries and it's very hard to say. But yeah, guys, I recommend this book a lot as well. Now the final book that I got here is a bit of a bonus book. This must be the biggest book ever written on fucking ghosts. Look at the size of this thing. How many pages is this one? It's about 30 by 30. And it's about 750 pages long, purely on ghosts. And this has really got everything about ghosts. I mean everything. It goes into so many accounts. It goes into so many different perspectives on what they could be. It goes into equipment, on how they're tracked. It just goes into everything about them, really. And it's just kind of a random silly book that I found in a charity shop again as well, and I just couldn't resist it when I seen it, because it was just so massive and purely on ghosts. It's like someone must have Hans Holzer, he really went all out for it on this one. Haunted places, haunted houses, haunted people, true encounters with the world beyond. So if you're interested in if you're interested in ghosts, and you're interested in books, you can't go wrong with an absolutely mammoth book on ghosts. And that's all I have in this episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope that you got some good recommendations out of this, and there's some books in here that you want to learn, buy or read. I have a lot more books on this sort of thing that go into more detail and depth on any specific subject. But I thought in this episode that we just limit it to what I consider these great books to just have in your library, and when you're feeling bored or you just want to learn something interesting and new, maybe attention span isn't too great in the moment, and like I said, you just want to sort of have something that's comparable to the internet. You just want something that's easy to browse, digestible, you know, like 10-20 minutes a chapter max, like nothing too heavy, and very insightful. Learn a lot, get referred to a lot of other great works, and your imagination really widens when you read about the capacities that this universe has. Well, that, guys, I'm gonna leave it, but take care. If you have any recommendations yourself, or if there's any books that you recommend, anything like that, just leave a comment below. You take care, guys. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in.